Troy, Stokes, Ridge Mills, Gansevoort, Denty, Bellamy, and Staley. And our meals we serve between the hours of 10:30 a.m. and 12 o'clock p.m. A little bit different format than most schools. We're providing a hot lunch between that time and then a bagged breakfast for the following day. And this is available for any student in Rome is eligible for the meal. It's the meals actually, and they are free of charge through the federal department summer feed program. So that will begin tomorrow. There's a lot of information. Unfortunately, at this time, right, everything has been forced into an electronic format, so our website is the most comprehensive area to get information. Later this morning, by the end of today, we will have launched a new website connected with the school district that is specifically targeted towards the coronavirus information, so it's a more comprehensive place for folks to get what they need.
So many questions, I guess you answer about this. For both of you, how long do you think this is going to last? Since this is supposed to peak somewhere between now and next Christmas, and everything is hit or miss, what is plan like B and C?
It's impossible, honestly, to have a plan B or C at this point. The simple reality is, I was at a Oneida County safety meeting last week, the day before everything happened, and everybody assumed it was a big secret meeting, that we were closing the schools at that meeting, and nobody had any information until 24 hours later that the county executive was going to issue the state of emergency and order the schools closed. So the information comes fast and furious, and we respond to it as best we can when we get it.
How did I got to say, you do yeoman's job of getting the information out, but parents, what do you give them to help them? Well, frankly, let me back that up. Strike that. Since parents have trouble helping kids with schoolwork nowadays, as one that did, how do you? What are the parents really expected to do with lessons?
Well, I think what we're expecting our parents to do is to try to do basic maintenance of skills. So there are things that we can do every day to help kids continue to grow, which is reading books, reading articles. If folks need access to books, we have stuff available that we can send home. We just need to know that and contact our school. Writing is another easy thing that people can do every day. Just find a writing prompt, do a journal entry. You hate to say go back to the future here, turn back the clock before technology, but there's a lot of good things you can still do at home. You can do a lot of math skills relative to just general conversation around the house. And our teachers have provided resource sheets for families to work on if they need to, some good places to go to get information. We have a whole host of electronic sites for those that do have internet access at home and can do that. The bigger challenge right now is reaching those families who might not have internet access and trying to find a way to make sure that they have enough at their disposal to make sure that they can get some stuff done.
Mr. Hampe, how does this catch the board off? What types of things does it throw in the
to the mix? Well, I mean, one of the most obvious one are public meetings. We have gotten advice and counsel that there can be flexibility now. I mean, there used to be some pretty serious hoops we had to jump through, for example, to have a board member attend from a distance. And that's been relaxed to a certain extent. But, as I said earlier, the information changes day to day. Most recently, we've been told we still have to have a public access option. We're working to put together a streaming video opportunity. The bigger challenge was it has to be closed captioned to be in compliance with ADA. And right now, I believe the most obvious option is YouTube, because it has a live action, real-time closed captioning feature. But, I mean, again, we're going to be doing the best we can, giving our best effort. At our last meeting, kind of a strategy meeting, all the board members are throwing out different ideas of what sort of platform would be the best way to present, how can we get public comment to come in, and that's what we're working on. Our regularly scheduled meeting for Thursday is still on, and we're going to continue trying to put together the work of the district as best we can.
Does this have any effect on school board voting, bonding? There were a lot of plans a couple of months when you were in fixing up the field and putting out bids and all of this good stuff to get things moved around. But what happens now?
So fortunately for that project, the voters have already approved it. So the delays in that project will simply be whether or not State Education Department has the available staff to review our plans when we submit them, and we plan to submit them. And this would be our first mini project would be the athletic surface over at the stadium and the through wall flashing at the high school. If you've been paying attention for many years, there's been flashing absent on the brick facade at the high school. That's going to be a part of this initial project to try and get that completed before next winter. Those plans are ready to go and be submitted either later this week or early next week. Whether or not SED has the staff to review and approve them is a different story, but I don't see any hiccup really with that part of the project. The bigger question right now is, as Steve kind of alluded to, is things change by the day. So we don't know if they're going to keep the budget calendar as it is. The budget calendar is a state-mandated piece that every district follows the same calendar throughout the state. There's been no guidance on whether or not that thing's going to move forward at the same time frames. And quite frankly, I think a lot of that stuff, there's way more questions still than answers for everything. And obviously there's a pecking order, and I think those types of things are just pushed way to the bottom of the list right now as the government and state ed tries to make sure that the kids' needs are met before we start worrying about district budget and finance. Even though that those of us that are leading districts, I think that's probably the first question we have is how does this affect all of that, because there's a lot of work that goes into it.
With the way the state has their funding that they give schools figured in this Byzantine way, and the fact that the governor asked the state controller to hurry up and come out with some new projected figures, and he did yesterday, and governor probably wishes he hadn't asked for that information, but they're looking at another $7 billion mess on top of the $6 billion they hadn't figured out yet. Does this have you pause about whether or not the school's going to get what? And I realize it's horrible to figure out anyhow, but with these numbers coming out, what the heck do you do?
Well, first I think I'm going to get my resume ready for the comptroller's job when I'm done with this one. I think I told the board 2 nights ago to expect about a $5 to $7 billion deficit, and I didn't know that the comptroller announced that. So hey, either I'm Nostradamus or I pay good attention to my constituents. But no, in all seriousness, if we can't have some fun during these times, I don't know what we're going to do. But in seriousness, it is concerning because we already knew that there was as you mentioned, a $6 to $7 billion deficit concern at the state level, and this changes things dramatically. And we don't really know at this point. I'm being told, I had a great conversation with Senator Griffo the other night. And he, in my last communication with him, he thinks that we still will see an on-time budget for the state, which will be helpful for school districts in the sense we'll know what to prepare for sooner. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be a positive state budget for school districts financially because the money has to go elsewhere right now. And so when you're talking about Rome specifically, we started a few weeks ago looking at a $7 million deficit for next year. I think you're going to see that grow to $9 to $11 million deficit simply from the situation with the coronavirus. President
Hampe, we're talking with Peter Blake, Superintendent of Schools in Rome, and Steve Hampe, President of the Rome Board of Education. How being that the board brings to the table, everybody who's representing different segments of the city brings different things to the table. What are you doing to try and even anything out? What are the concerns that are now at the top of the pile that weren't even on the pile before?
Well, I don't think this is new. The concern, obviously, is being able to provide the best services for our students in the district. And, I mean, I have to say that even with any political differences that individual board members may have, everybody is pulling together on this one. This is an all-hands-on-deck kind of situation where as long as we are confident that the information that we get is being utilized in the most effective way to help our students in the community, that's what we're focused on.
What kind of, in unusual situations like this where you've got money budgeted for transportation but the kids are out, and can that money be used and reallocated to plug holes where there might have been holes before, or is this money committed to be spent irrespective of?
Well, no, it is not committed to be spent. And in fact, we spent some hours yesterday kind of going over this current year's budget cycle, and All told, right now we expect to see in the ballpark of a $700,000 savings due to the current shutdown for 4 weeks. The problem with transportation that's really tricky for people to understand is that money is reimbursable. So for every dollar we don't spend this year, we lose 90 cents next year in revenue.
Oh, you're kidding.
So actually, the fact that the buses are not running is a detriment to the school district and the community financially, because it is a very highly aidable expense that we receive 90% of all dollars spent back the following year. So it's one of our largest revenue sources is transportation. And there's some other tricky formulas. You'll probably see stories of school districts delivering meals on their buses right now and using their buses for things like that, and this is probably a good time and platform to try and get this word out. We've been told by state ed, and we knew this, but they've confirmed it, that any district doing that, not only are those routes non-aidable, but every time you use a bus for a non-aidable expense, it reduces the amount of money you draw back the next year. So while those districts are trying to do great things, they're going to get penalized financially for that next year if they hold everybody to the line on the rules on this one. The rules change daily, so who knows what's going to happen, but that's one of the main reasons why in Rome we've chosen not to use buses to deliver things. We are trying to work through community schools to set up some delivery services for meals and goods and things that people need through a volunteer basis where community members can volunteer to support and do that, but not do it through our transportation department so we don't jeopardize any kind of revenue stream coming in the door for next year. Jesus,
somewhere there's somebody sitting in an office that one side is labeled coming and one side is labeled got you going, and they meet every day. I'm looking at the news release that came out from the state. The most optimistic revenue scenario puts a $4 billion behind the $6 billion that we already had, and in the worst case scenario, $7 billion on top of the $6 billion. Does this? How do you even look? And I know you explained that you kind of take it as it comes with a large bottle of scotch. But how did the two of you even knowing that this could go on? Now they say through July before it starts to taper off, and if you get back into school, it upsets everything from vacation. How do you go back a month behind now? Do they? You still got to get your 180 days in, I presume, Mr. Hampe? Or
that's been waived.
That's been waived.
But I don't know if Mr. Blake has more recent information. That gets tied to state aid as well. And even though they're waiving it, they hadn't waived the financial link yet.
Yeah. So, again, and Rocco, you love to talk formulas with me. I know that. We've been through the state aid formula. So this formula is getting crazy, too. Right now, the way they're running the 180-day formula is the governor has closed all schools for 2 weeks, right? So that news is out there. So essentially what he said is that 2-week window will be exempted from the 180-day law. So technically your school year needs to be 170 days this year. You have your built-in 5 emergency days, so 165 is the current number. And any district that does not make 165 before the end of June, the rating day I believe is like June 26th this year, any district short of that mark will be penalized state aid per day short of 165. And again, that's a today's rule. I don't think if this goes into, even if this goes into the end of March and we're able to get back into, or the end of April and we're able to get back into school for a few weeks in May, I don't see him holding the line on that. When you look at all the things going on, we just talked about the billions of dollars that the state government's behind. I just don't see the governor penalizing communities with state aid for schools based on not being in session for a certain number of days this year. There's so many bigger issues relative to this whole situation to get that petty, but he may. Who knows?
It seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this isn't sarcasm, but it seems that they've got every rule that they have, the result of it is that they get to take money back without having a formula that you can understand with how much money you're supposed to get before your budget year starts. Am I missing something here, or is this generally the way it feels?
It's penalties, right? So that's what we play with.
But to that larger point, I mean, it has been suggested nationally that we are in a new paradigm. rules, all sorts of rules have been changing. I heard the other day that the TSA liquid amounts have changed because you need hand sanitizer. You want to bring that with you. My hope is that when this is all said and done, the point that you're making, that yes, there were all of these rules. And earlier this year, the state legislature was talking about reworking the foundation aid formula. Hopefully, when we're done with all this, now we've had the impetus where we can say, we can't fool around with this anymore. We've got to get this done. This event has alerted us to so many different ins and outs that don't need to exist anymore. Let's get rid of those. Let's make a plan that makes sense and hopefully move forward from there.
I would agree with you 100% if it wasn't for the last – I didn't do the news thing, but they had issued a news blurb that the last sentence was the governor still expects the budget to be in place April 1st. Giving them lots of time to think about the budget and what they had on their plate and then all of this stuff. So I just tend to think they're going to have to jam something through. How does, listener question, how does study from home work? Oh, I see. Thank you for the parentheses. It looks like how does study from home work? So how does it go? Studying at home, what guidance was given to parents? I know you mentioned that you gave them some sheets.
So
and things.
we spoke about this a little bit earlier. We've tried to give pretty generic, broad guidance. We have resource pages set up on our website for those that can. Everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but the vast majority of folks have access to a smartphone, which would provide them access to the website to see certain information. But learning from home is as simple as doing your best to maintain student skills, reading books, reading newspaper articles, magazines, whatever you can get your hands on to read, writing
general
prompts,
stuff.
Asking kids to write. You can talk about math things throughout the house, maybe have them do some baking or cooking with you, measure some things out. There's different things that we can do in the home that you generally don't think about sometimes. And so what we've asked our teachers to do is provide a resource that has some of that information on it, just some general reminders of everyday things you do that are academic in nature, and then also some links to some educational resources online. One thing that's a little bit different than what families may be experiencing or hearing in other communities is we have asked our staff to not provide any form of work that would need to be graded. And we have directed them that we are not going to do graded work during this period of time. And our rationale behind that is there's significant disparities to access of information and educational resources right now. There's equity issues that arise from that. You've got students with learning disabilities that have IEPs or individual education plans, that have specific supports by law that they don't have access to anymore. And it's not fair to all students to expect them to continue on as they would in the normal educational setting. So for that reason, we've asked our staff not to send home work that would be a traditional worksheet, workbook, things that would be graded, but with ideas and thoughts on what they can do to continue to learn. And for anyone listening or any family at home that might not have some of those thoughts or answers and might need some support, I urge you to contact either your school's principal. First, I would start with your child's teacher, right? The teachers are chomping at the bit to help from home. Many of them are not happy that they're home right now, so they're chomping at the bit to support families and students however they can. So please contact your child's teacher if you need support. And then you can always contact the principal or the district office. Our educational programs department is more than willing to support as well.
Mr. Hampe, from the board's perspective, what kind of things do you have to tell the public that are home? What is the board doing, or what can they do or trying to do to get the state to move along, or maybe change some things if this goes on more than 2 weeks?
Well, the unfortunate reality is we are not alone. So, you've got every district in the state making the same pleas. We're doing what we've always been doing. We're getting the word out. We're utilizing our own contacts to try to propel things in a positive way. If the governor's listening, we were talking about the fact that you seem to put the Board of Education issues at a lower priority. He's changed some of the rules for the state elections, but has not included the Board of Ed elections in them yet. So we're still kind of in limbo as to whether or not those will change. Speaking about what our teachers are doing, one thing, again, about the new paradigm, I've been seeing a lot of feedback in social media that now that parents are home trying their best to be homeschoolers now, they're starting to really appreciate the hard work it is to be an educator, and if whatever support our teachers can give them, as Mr. Blake said, they're ready and willing to do it. But now parents are really coming to understand teaching's hard work, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of skill, and hopefully that's remembered when this is all said and done.
When it's time to go back. How long will the ramp-up time be to get the schools back open if they all of a sudden do this suddenly?
I would say that if they make an announcement on a Friday morning that they're going to reopen schools, we'll be good to go by Monday. I would say we would probably need, hopefully we would need no more than 1 day in between the announcement and the start of school. So if they announced on a Monday, we could probably try and get back in session by Wednesday. Our staff is at the ready. Our buildings right now are locked and alarmed. We've sent everybody home. We've got them closed down. There is minimal usage at certain buildings throughout the day, small amounts of time, small areas within buildings that are being used. So when we do have to clean, we're not cleaning the entire building, and we're able to maintain as cleanly of a building as possible. So I would say probably about a day we would need to make sure that we get all of our building maintenance and custodial staff in to do a thorough cleaning, and off we go.
Here's what I'm always nagging you about. People are wondering, callers, sports. What happens to the sports season?
Sports.
Because that's a vital part of education.
Yeah, we just launched an FAQ portion of our website yesterday, and I did address that question. Right now, for Rome, we participate in Section 3 athletics, and Section 3 has announced their season will begin on April 14th. So that's the day that we're all scheduled to come back. Will be the beginning of the season. If we come back to school that day, that's the day that sports will start. If we're not back in session by then, I couldn't tell you. It's possible that we will lose the whole season. One thing I will say decisively is that we in Rome will not cancel our spring sports season as a standalone. We're going to stick with Section 3 on this one. I've heard many coaches in high school athletics interviewed during this process, and students. I think if you talk to the students as well, they would much rather play one game this season than not do anything at all as a team, and just as a sense of unity in what they do. So that's our plan for now.
And just to put a plug out there, the theater and music programs are also shut down. Okay. They're hoping to ramp back up as soon as we're in session and get their performances on a schedule again as well.
What is the plan if they don't? And I got just a sneaky feeling that the state does things because it's such a fluid thing that in a week or so they decide not to open up, and they say we're going to have to push this forward and push it. Because now that the state is really doing large-scale testing, of course, known viruses are going to go up, and then everybody's going to repanic again. And is it possible that what would you do if they extended this another 6 weeks, and before you know it, it's like they're hinting. Whenever you listen to somebody and they were talking about this will be over in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and now it's a little more like it's going to peak in June or July, and before you know it, it's Christmas time already. And is it even remotely possible that the school year just comes back in the middle of summer and continues on through the?
I hope not, and I think it makes sense it would make sense logistically to try and add a month and start in August. But I don't know that that's fair to families. At this point in time, a lot of people plan for things, and you just don't know. And I'm a proponent of 12-month schooling with different vacation schedules built into the year. I think that it would be more beneficial for kids. It would be a major shift, but. Really, if we get too far into end of April and May, it's almost not worth coming back at all. And then the bigger concern turns to, and we already have the concern, is 4 weeks out, how much of our kids losing? And how much ground can you make them up? Can they make up? And then what are you doing? And I think if there's a prolonged closure, as you're talking about, while I think there's a lot of factors that make it easier on school districts for planning and moving forward, and if we know, say, towards the end of April that we're not coming back this year and we can start looking forward to next year, that buys us 2 months of time to make sure that we're good with everything we've got to have in September. But the other big problems that arise are your senior class, your students that, how do you do a graduation ceremony for those kids? Your students that are trying to progress a grade level. Elementary, while they might not have all the skills you traditionally would want them to have to move on to the next grade level, social promotion is really a thing now, and people try to follow the ages more so than the skill, unfortunately sometimes. But more kids move on every year just because. And then you've got your high school students that need to take state assessments, regents exams that are meant for credit and moving on. And so the concerns relative to those pieces really become important that we'd have to figure out, but we would certainly have time to do that during the month of May. My personal opinion, if you're going to call off the rest of the school year, I wouldn't try and bring people back early in August. I would simply cut bait and start again in September and try and resume as normal as you can.
There was a time when superintendents and board presidents attended Chamber of Commerce luncheons and smiled, and all the job was just really great and happy.
Yeah, I think that was before the personal computer made its way into the business.
Any advice either of you want to give the people at home that are listening? Hang in there, or something positive, or is it just a hang in there? It's a day by day thing.
Well, I think it is a simple reality that when challenged, Americans do tend to hunker down and do their best and pull together to try to get to the other side. I mean, just as an example, when we were deciding that keeping the food bank at Bellamy wasn't the most advantageous and wanted to move it to Staley, I went to show up to help move the materials out of Bellamy, showed up at 2 o'clock when we were supposed to, and so many people had already shown up that they had already offloaded everything out of the building. And all we had to do was now just escort it over to Staley and then take it out of the cars over there. But it's that sort of spirit that is going to get us through this. And, as Mr. Blake was saying, whatever the school calendar ends up being, if families and kids are ready to basically face the challenge, that whatever we have to do next year when we start, hunker down, get ready, move forward. I mean, the simple reality is we can't make this go away. It's here. We've got to deal with it. How we deal with it is going to be the measure.
I think you're both doing a really, truly a great job in keeping things calm, because from this end of things, there's so much hysteria out there that you can't even figure out what to do. So at least Rome has got its act together.
We hope so. I mean, we're trying our best. And if you don't mind, I got a couple of shameless plugs if I got a few seconds of things going on. First and foremost, the Rome Alliance for Education Connected Community Schools program, in conjunction with the school district. We are opening our 2 food pantries today from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Those are located at Gansevoort Elementary School and Staley Elementary School. And both pantries will be open weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Simply, it's going to be a pull up to the door, let the workers know, the volunteers know, what your family need is in terms of family size, and then they'll bring you out a pre-rationed box of goods for that day. The community schools program does have some different parameters on things in terms of frequency of ability to visit, but that's on their end. That information is available at the pantry. We talked about our breakfast and lunch program through the school district. That is set to begin tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. at all 7 elementary schools, available for all students, regardless of age. Please, if you're a high school student, just go to your most nearby elementary school, and same thing for pre-K students, go to your most nearby elementary school. As long as you're a student, they're there to serve you a hot lunch and then a breakfast for the following day. And the last thing I want to mention is that we launched a survey last night for families that may need technological devices. While we can't provide internet access, we do have the ability to provide Chromebooks for students who, some families may only have a single computer but have 3 children. And so that makes the computing time or the ability to access the internet frequently for kids tough. So we have the availability to deploy Chromebooks for any student that's in need. We ask you to go online on our website and through social media. There's a link to a form that simply says, I have a need, I'm interested. As of last night, within a few hours of launching, I think we are up to almost 300 families that are looking for Chromebooks at this point. So we're hoping to start handing those out on Friday. The only thing that might delay that a concern would be the sheer volume of people that are requesting a device that we might not be able to do it all in one shot. We don't want to bring 500 people together to hand out computers. But there's obviously some forms and some sign-offs required on that relative to insurance and liability. But we are trying to work to get devices in the students' hands that might be in need so that they can learn from home remotely through Google, through the Internet, however that might be. So I just continue to ask people to stay tuned to our social media on Facebook. I know a lot of folks use Facebook. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our website. We're trying to do as many things like this, radio shows where we can be, heard in the community. We've got an FAQ page out there right now. So please just stay tuned. And I'm going to reiterate to our community, please don't forget there's a Rome City School District active and well in the state of Georgia. Every now and then we get folks in Rome here in New York sharing stories from the Rome City School District in Georgia, and it creates a little bit of a PR nightmare for us as we have to backtrack and try and correct people. So anything folks can do to make sure they're paying careful attention to our district-sponsored social media and that it's legitimately from us would be helpful. It just helps our staff not have to do additional work right now when it's hard enough to make sure that we're getting as much information and facts out there as we can.
Just a hint, if you're looking at Rome, Georgia, their mascot is a wolf. Ours is not.
Red and black.
Peter Blake.
We love you, Rome, Georgia.
Superintendent of Rome Schools, and Steve Hampe, the President of the Board of Education. Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break and pay some bills. We'll be back after these messages.
Norman T. Balone, Assistant Janitor,